everyone, it's Dr. Carmen here, and I'm here just to answer a question that I got asked quite a bit after my first video about my COVID-19 story. And the question was, what did I do? So what treatments did I use? What medications? How did I basically handle and treat my infection? And I want to start off by saying that as of now, there are no approved treatments for COVID-19. So there's no medication, there's no antivirals, there's nothing specific at the moment that has been approved for the use of treating people with COVID-19 infection. We also don't have a vaccine yet. So if you remember in my previous video, I said that I'm hoping that as a result of getting the infection, I'm developing antibodies towards COVID-19, which will then hopefully give me immunity so that I don't pick up the infection again. Now, there have been reports of people who are testing positive a second time round for COVID-19. Whether this is a new infection, whether they're getting reinfected, or whether the virus is reactivating, or whether there's something wrong with the tests, it's still uncertain. But the traditional or the conventional wisdom that we know is that if you get an infection, your body then in response, so as part of your immune response, you develop something called antibodies. Now, antibodies are basically immune type proteins that are able to respond in a way that they're able to either neutralize the infection, or they're able to kind of stick to viral particles and cause those viral particles to kind of clump up together, preventing them from being able to spread into the cells and replicate. So it's a way that your body's defense mechanism builds in response to being exposed to an infection. Now, the reason why I mention that is because that's actually what vaccinations are based off of. So if you get a vaccination towards something, basically what a vaccine is it's usually like a small amount of either dead viral particles or slightly inactivated viral particles that is injected into your body so that you start to develop these antibodies. So that if you then come into contact with the infection, let's say, for example, we're talking about coronavirus now, and let's say they manage to develop a vaccination, and in the vaccination is going to be either parts of the coronavirus or the coronavirus itself that's dead, or maybe the coronavirus that's been deactivated in some way, injected into the body so that you start to develop antibodies, which are these immune proteins, which then if I now get exposed to coronavirus infection, my body will release these antibodies, which then go and neutralize the virus, cause the viral particles to clump up together so that they can be eradicated out of the system. In other words, you'll be able to better fight the infection if you are exposed to it. So that's what a vaccination is. We don't have a vaccine now. It's anticipated that we'll have one in the next 12 months or so, even 18 months, or sometime next year, perhaps the vaccination will be ready to be rolled out. Many countries across the world are working on a vaccination, but we don't have one yet. We also don't have antiviral medication. So there are some antiviral medications that exist. For example, we know about antiretrovirals that we use to treat HIV, for example. These are specific medications that are targeted towards the HIV virus to prevent its entry into our cells and prevent it from being able to replicate. So there are antivirals that exist. Some of them are being studied against coronavirus, but again, nothing has been approved yet. We also know that there are some other medications, like, for example, hydroxychloroquine, that is being used around the world in some places with promising results, but again, it has not been approved for the use in coronavirus as a standard treatment. It's still under clinical investigation, but this is a medication that has anti-malarial properties. It's also used in certain autoimmune diseases like lupus, for example. And I'm going to get into a little bit more about hydroxychloroquine in a moment, but just to say that as of now, it hasn't been yet approved. The second thing that I have to say before I tell you what I did when I got this infection is that I made a video about supporting your immune system. So you guys can go and check that video out. But I think it is important to note that I do try to live a relatively healthy lifestyle anyway, okay? And so a lot of people have been asking me, do I think that it's because of the way that I eat? So some of you may know that I follow a completely plant-based diet. Some people are asking me, is it because of the way you eat that you were able to get over this infection so well? Some of you may know that I hardly have any sugar in my diet. That's another thing that I try to do, and people are asking me if that has anything to do with it. But I just want to remind us that as far as we can see from the data, about 80% of people who get COVID-19 infection are going to have mild to moderate symptoms, okay? And so we know that the majority of people who get this infection are actually not going to require to go to the hospital to be treated. About 20%, and again, these numbers are still conservative because this is still evolving. We can see the way it is affecting certain countries more than it's affecting others, and there are a lot of contributing factors as to why that is, but it's largely accepted that about 20% of people will go on to develop severe infection. And we know from the data, again, that's still emerging, that the rule seems to be, and again, I put that in inverted commas because there are people who fall outside of this rule, but the rule appears that people with underlying chronic medical conditions, like things like heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, etc., seem to be at more risk of getting severe forms of this disease. Okay, we also know that the elderly also tend to fit into this age group now, or into this group of more at-risk people. Now, we also know that there are some elderly people, some even with chronic underlying medical conditions, that have done remarkably well, even though they've been infected with COVID-19. And we also know that there are some very young people, some even athletes who don't have chronic medical conditions, who have had very bad outcomes as a result of COVID-19 infection, okay? So the information that we have is still emerging, still evolving, but what we know generally is that most people will not get severe disease. 20% of people approximately will have severe disease, and of those people, a percentage will then go on to have adverse outcomes, and eventually some of those will lead to death, okay? So coming back to that question about whether some of the things that I do have contributed, I personally think that they have helped. But am I saying that, you know, if you do all of these things that you're definitely going to be safe? It's impossible for me to say that. So it's very important for me to be careful about how I answer this question. But one thing that I can say is that I do try to live as healthily as I can. I can definitely improve, but I do try to be as healthy as possible. So to answer the question, what did I do when I started to feel sick? Even before I started to feel sick, I started to take certain supplements, and those are vitamin C. I've been taking high dose vitamin C since about the beginning of March now. I've also started taking zinc, and I want to mention zinc in a little while, especially as it relates to hydroxychloroquine. And I've also started taking echinacea. Okay, so some of you may have heard of echinacea. Echinacea is basically a herbal, it comes from a plant, a flowering plant. It's a herbal remedy. A lot of people have been using it for many, many years, but it has been shown to help to boost the immune system or support the immune system, okay? And it also helps to reduce inflammation. Now, I've been taking echinacea since the beginning of March, and I took it throughout the time when I was feeling sick. I continued to take my vitamin C. I actually increased my dose of vitamin C when I got sick. And I also have been eating a lot of citrus fruit as well during this time. partly because of the vitamin C, but also because I mentioned in my previous video, I had no appetite. And the one thing that I was able to eat was citrus fruit. And so I've been eating lots of citrus fruits, especially since I got ill and even before that. And then zinc. Now, one of the ways that it's believed that hydroxychloroquine, the anti-malarial medication I mentioned earlier, one of the ways it's believed that it works is by increasing the amount of zinc inside your cells, which then goes to reduce the rate at which viral particles can replicate. Okay, so that's how it's believed that hydroxychloroquine has an effect against coronavirus and other viruses as well. So my advice is not for everybody to go out there and rush and try and get hold of hydroxychloroquine, because, as I said, it hasn't been approved yet and it needs to be prescribed by a doctor. Also, remember, this medication does have side effects and it needs to be monitored by a healthcare professional, okay? But one thing that you can do is you can start to take a zinc supplement. Zinc is powerful to support the immune system. I mentioned it in my previous video about supporting the immune system. So absolutely everybody can go on a zinc supplement. I think that it will definitely help to support your immune system. The other thing that I just do, and I continued to do through the time when I was sick, is I take CBD oil. I've spoken about CBD oil before. CBD helps to maintain homeostasis in your body, but it also helps to support and modulate immune function. I'm not saying that, you know, CBD is the be all and end all. We've had this discussion before, but I definitely did continue to take my CBD oil throughout the time when I was ill. So I think it is worthwhile to mention that because it is something that I did. The other thing that the only real medication that I took throughout this time, because a lot of people maybe think that, oh, because I'm a doctor, I had access to all this medication and that's why I got better so quickly. Again, it's probably because I was just one of those people who got mild disease anyway. But I'm not a medication fan. I don't take medication easily, but I did take one medication that it takes a lot for me to take medication, and this is seemingly a simple medication, but I have to mention it for another important reason. So the one medication that I actually did take was paracetamol. I took it on 2 occasions. The first time was one day when the body pain was honestly excruciating and I could not take anything. So I took it one time for body pain, and I also took paracetamol one time for a headache. Severe headache. I don't take medication just for a headache, you know. So that day the headache actually woke me up from my sleep at night, and I took paracetamol. But I want to say that it is important for you to remember that taking any medication that will reduce a fever is not a good idea when you have a viral infection, and especially if you have coronavirus infection. The reason is because fever is important. Your body is producing a fever as part of its immune response. And if you take medication to artificially reduce the fever, you are going to reduce the ability that your body has to fight the virus effectively, meaning that it may take you a bit longer to get over the infection than if you just allowed your body's fever to naturally progress. Now, I'm saying this specifically for adults because children, of course, are at risk for having very high spikes in their temperature, which can be dangerous. They can lead to febrile convulsions. I'm not speaking about in children. I'm speaking about in adults. If you have coronavirus infection, or even if you have an infection of any kind, as far as possible, try to avoid medication like paracetamol and anti-inflammatories that will reduce your body's temperature, because you actually need the fever to fight the infection. I know that it's uncomfortable to go through a fever. I know that it makes you feel miserable, but fever has a purpose and it's part of the immune system's response to infection. And so I would absolutely advise against artificially reducing your body's temperature by using things like paracetamol and especially anti-inflammatories, because this may actually cause the infection to run longer than it actually needs to. Another important thing that I have to say here, and I just want to end perhaps on this note, is that often patients would come to me and say that they've, if they have flu-like symptoms, that they've taken a combination of Medlemin with Disprin. Guys, please do not do this ever. Like, don't do it on a regular day, even if you have a cold or a flu. Please don't do this. Some of you may not know that Medlemin in one sachet contains 800 milligrams of aspirin. Disprin usually contains anywhere from 300 to 500 additional milligrams of aspirin. Okay, so you shouldn't be putting those two things together. It's not a good idea, and it's absolutely not a good idea when it comes to coronavirus infection. There have been some reports that anti-inflammatories can actually make this infection worse. They haven't been confirmed, but certainly you don't want to be taking anything to artificially reduce your body temperature. And the final thing I want to say on anti-inflammatories in general is that, please, another thing that I would notice sometimes is that children will be given aspirin under the age of 12. Please, guys, there's a very serious condition called Ray's syndrome, which happens when children who are getting over viral infections take aspirin. It's a very serious condition. It can cause liver damage, brain damage, it can lead to seizures. So it's very important. A lot of patients I found did not know that children should never be given aspirin. So unless expressly prescribed and under the control of a medical professional. But please, children, especially children under the age of 12 years old, should never be given aspirin unless strictly under the control or the prescription of a medical practitioner. So I hope that I've covered everything. I hope that that answers your question about what I did, and I hope that all of you guys stay safe and take care of yourselves. Bye.